co-founder and managing partner at NewSpace Capital. He's got 20 years of experience in finance, products, and business development. He's got a black belt in Aikido Shinkan, which is, I think, Aikido, and spent half his career in the defense industry. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Bogdan Gogulan.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thanks to LPEA for the invitation. And a special thanks for putting this session in the morning while people are still fresh and ready to listen to innovative strategies. And so we're going to talk about why invest in space. Space. When we mention space, people are usually thinking about three things. First one is SpaceX. Second one is deep space exploration. And then if we're in Luxembourg, then of course people think about SES. And people think about those things for a good reason. SES revolutionized commercial space, brought satellite TV into people's homes. Space exploration, it really sort of corresponds with our natural curiosity, with also people wanting to take a look at the world from the outside, sort of to feel themselves just as a member of the human race, rather than as a representative of a certain nationality or faith. And then third one is SpaceX. Well, clearly because, of course, space really energized the space industry over the last couple of decades. And actually, it revolutionized that absolutely dramatically. And both SpaceX and other commercial launch providers, they brought us to the stage where, since the times of the shuttle, the launch cost went down by over 90%. And that had a disproportionate multiplier effect on the space industry. And so over the same period of time, the number of objects that were launched to space increased by the factor of 20. And that was what's underpinned the very healthy performance of the space industry. So since 2019, the space industry was growing at 14% compound annual growth rate, so well above the economy. And then it is projected to grow, even during the slowdown of the next 2 to 3 years, it is expected to grow at 11%. And then by mid-century, we should get to over 2 trillion, and that's 5 times growth of the industry. But certainly, not all of that, or even just a small fraction of that, is direct-to-home TV or space exploration or launch. And actually, if we're thinking about the launch, the overall launch market is just $6 billion. So that's about 1.3% of the overall $450 billion industry. And satellites, so what SES and others are doing, is at the moment just around 16 billion. Certainly bigger than launch, but still a marginal part of the market. And in launch, everyone knows that with SpaceX reusable use technology, there has been huge technical innovation. Same happened with satellites. Miniaturization of electronics allowed us to really miniaturize the satellites. They used to be the size of the bus, now the size of the shoebox. They used to be in geostationary orbit, now they are LEO Earth orbit. So they're within the magnetic field of the Earth. They're protected from the radiation. That allows us better bandwidth, lower latency, so much more efficient communication and Earth observation. But if you look at ground infrastructure, is actually 5 times bigger than launch. And ground infrastructure includes everything from the antennas to the networks, to everything that actually allows people to get the communication, get the Earth observation data, get the connectivity on the ground. And those 3 segments together, they give us this flexible infrastructure that over the last 2 decades became much more efficient, to the point when we actually can do from space things better, cheaper, and faster than we can do things terrestrially for a number of applications. And it is the applications, this is what all of this is about. This is the applications for the clients, for the customers on Earth. And I think one thing that I would want you to take away from that slide is that while people are thinking about the space industry, they're thinking about the space risk, about the fact that, well, you have to launch something outside of the Earth atmosphere. But actually, the disproportionately big part of the industry is ground-based. So it has the exposure to the growth of the industry, but doesn't have the inherent space risk. And if we think about the applications, and we would want to find out, well, who are going to be the customers of those applications? And it is going to be very traditional, plain vanilla businesses. The customer is on Earth. And what's great that if you look at those industries, their future growth is actually dependent on the satellite-enabled products and services. One example, in finance, if we're thinking about insurance, our portfolio companies are helping insurance companies to save hundreds of millions of dollars in working capital by helping them to process the claims faster. Or if we're thinking about the agriculture, by mid-century we're going to have a 56% food gap. The only way to fill that gap is by precision farming and precision agriculture, and that is enabled from space. So IoT, Earth observation, GPS for autonomous vehicles. So all of that is what enables the autonomous precision farming and agriculture. And as a result of this flexible, efficient space infrastructure, now the businesses can use the space-enabled products and services, and that turns companies into space companies. In the same way that 20 years ago we were talking about, well, is this a tech company or is this a non-tech company? Now there isn't such a distinction. Every company is a technology company. In the same way right now, every company is turning into a space company. Now the question is why? And this is when I want to talk about the productivity. And the fact is that because the space infrastructure is more flexible and more efficient, it helps companies and industries to bring in additional efficiency and productivity into their core activities. Early in the day, we were talking about the macroeconomic environment, lukewarm growth, questions with inflation. Well, if we take a look, a lot of that is actually underpinned by the slowdown in the productivity. We used to have the productivity at 5% growth, right? We went to 2.2, now it's 1.2 in the US, and actually in parts of Europe it's negative. And what space, in the same way that artificial intelligence are able to do, is bring the productivity growth back into those companies and into those industries. And of course, we as a private equity industry have a responsibility here as well, because we're thinking that looking at the decline in the productivity growth, we are partly to blame for it. Despite the huge amount of investment that happened over the last 10 years, we invested 50% less into productive assets in the decade following the 2008 crisis than we did prior to the 2008 crisis. So a lot of the investment actually went into speculative assets. And so right now, if we are to return growth into the economy, what we need to focus on is on productive investments. And that's why I want you to think about space. And space is not just about productivity and efficiency. It's also about doing that in a more sustainable way. The impact that the space industry is having is actually doing that, so the space infrastructure doing that at a much lower carbon footprint than terrestrial infrastructure. As a matter of fact, if we are looking just at a couple of industries across the globe and using at the impact that the space industry is having on it, there is already over 4.5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent being removed from the atmosphere every single year. And example again from our portfolio companies, one of our companies helped to, just earlier this year, helped to find, using the Earth observation analytics, helped to find a leak on a pipeline that was pumping out the methane, which is 80% more poisonous than CO2, at the same rate as 67 million cars. And this is just one of the leaks. So this space technology both can bring us back the productivity and efficiency into the industry and do that in a more sustainable way. So what I want to leave you with, why to invest in space? It's a large industry, $450 billion industry. At an inflection point, it has the stability and predictability of a large industry, but certain parts of it have the growth rates of the emerging industry. And so it helps us to get the returns for our investors, and as I said, doing that in a more sustainable way. Thank you.